This adopted kid built a $2 trillion empire from the passenger seat of a beat-up Chevy Blazer. He typed out a business plan during a cross-country drive in 1994. And 30 years later, his company makes $1.2 million every single minute. Not from viral products or flashy ads, but from a strategy that crushed entire industries and took over the cloud, the marketplace, even your living room. And just as the regulators came knocking, he vanished. Albuquerque, 1964. In a modest hospital room, a baby was born who would one day make it possible for you to order 600 glow-in-the-dark garden gnomes at 3 a.m. with a single click. His name wasn't Bezos yet. That would come later. His teenage mom, Jackie, was working as a secretary. His biological dad, a circus performer who vanished before little Jeff could even say, "Dada." But life has a funny way of working out. A few years later, a Cuban immigrant named Miguel Mike Bezos married Jackie, adopted Jeff, and gave him both a new last name and what would become the origin story of an empire. Even as a kid, Jeff was different. He was the type who'd ace every test, then stare at the stars a little too long while mumbling about colonizing the moon. At his high school graduation, he gave a speech declaring his dream to build space hotels and amusement parks in orbit. Everyone clapped politely, then probably went home wondering whether to be inspired or slightly concerned. Jeff, meanwhile, went to Princeton. There, he double majored in electrical engineering and computer science, because apparently, why choose just one way to take over the world? He graduated valedictorian, but he wasn't your typical popular genius. His brain ran on pure logic, copious amounts of caffeine, and what could only be described as an uncomfortable level of ambition. Still, he was charming in his own intense way, like if the Terminator could crack dad jokes. After college, Jeff did what any overachieving, overqualified tech geek would do in the early 90s. He bounced around safe, well-paying jobs, Bankers Trust, a failed telecom startup, the usual suspects. But then came D.E. Shaw, a mysterious Wall Street hedge fund with a reputation for hiring brilliantly weird people. Bezos joined and shot up to senior VP by age 30, working directly under David Shaw, a man who basically played 4D chess with financial markets for a living. It was at D.E. Shaw that Jeff met Mackenzie Tuttle, smart, sharp, and apparently willing to marry a guy who thought spreadsheets were genuinely romantic. They got engaged just 3 months after their first date. Everything changed with one number. Bezos came across a report that stopped him dead in his tracks. The internet was growing at 2,300% per year. This wasn't just some trendy tech bubble. This was a gravitational force, and Jeff had just discovered escape velocity. So he did what any good analyst would do. He made a spreadsheet, 20 different internet business ideas, online CDs, online clothing, online dog food, but one kept jumping out at him. Books. Why books? Simple. Millions of titles, compact storage, already standardized. Books were, as Jeff would later put it, the perfect gateway drug to e-commerce. Here's the thing though, Jeff was a senior VP at a prestigious Wall Street firm. He had money, prestige, respect, nice suits. So when he walked into his boss's office and said, "Hey, I'm quitting to sell books on the internet," his boss replied, "That sounds like a great idea for someone who doesn't already have a good job." Jeff did the only logical thing. He packed up his entire life, convinced Mackenzie to quit her job too, and started driving from New York to Seattle in their beat-up Chevy Blazer. And here's the beautiful part. While Mackenzie drove, Jeff sat in the passenger seat, typing up the Amazon business plan on his laptop. Somewhere along Interstate 80, between endless cornfields and truck stops, the world's largest online retailer was being written in bullet points at 65 miles per hour. But it almost wasn't called Amazon. Jeff's first choice was Cadabra, as in abracadabra, until his lawyer misheard it as cadaver. Not exactly ideal branding for selling cookbooks. Then he considered Relentless, which he liked so much he actually bought the domain. Fun fact, if you type relentless.com today, it still redirects to Amazon. Seriously, try it. But finally, he settled on Amazon. Why? It started with A, so it would show up early in alphabetized lists. Plus, according to Bezos, it was the biggest river in the world, which was perfect because Jeff didn't want to build a bookstore. He wanted to build the everything store. Back then, there was no AWS, no Alexa, no Prime. Just a man in a garage with a dream, a fax machine, and what friends described as a laugh like a hyena inhaling nitrous oxide. But here's what nobody, Not even Jeff fully realized at the time, this wasn't just another startup. This was the beginning of a 30-year siege on retail, logistics, and cloud computing. He was just a guy with a laptop and a business plan, but soon he'd become something much more dangerous. A founder with no fear, no limits, and a methodical plan to reshape the entire economy. The world had no idea what was about to hit it. Summer, 1994. Bezos officially founded Amazon with $10,000 in seed money from his parents. Money they later admitted came from their retirement fund. His office setup was legendary. A desk made from a door bolted to 2x4s, plain, functional, and a perfect symbol of the company's obsession with frugality. Every dollar saved was a dollar that could be pumped back into growth. In July 1995, the website went live. The next day, someone ordered Fluid Concepts and Creative Analogies, a dense technical book about artificial intelligence. Not exactly a bestseller, but it was a start. Then came more orders, and more. In those early days, Bezos would ring a bell in the office for every single sale, until they were getting so many orders, they had to stop because the bell never stopped ringing. Within weeks, customers from all 50 states and over 40 countries were clicking buy. Jeff had tapped into something deeper than just online shopping. He was selling access, efficiency, and most importantly, time. His philosophy was brutally simple: get big fast. And he meant it. There was no time for polish, just pure urgency. Code was written by people running on no sleep. Orders were packed by employees still learning the software as they went. Mistakes happened constantly. At one point, a textbook was accidentally listed for $23 million. But perfection wasn't the goal. Speed was everything. In 1997, Amazon went public. The company still wasn't profitable, and Wall Street analysts weren't convinced it ever would be. One famously called it Amazon.toast. But Bezos had a different message for investors. Think long-term growth, not short-term profit. The investors who believed him would eventually be rewarded beyond their wildest dreams. Around this time, Bezos launched something that would define Amazon forever: customer reviews. To most retailers, letting buyers trash talk products directly on your own website seemed insane. But Bezos believed transparency would build trust. And he was right. Customers didn't just come to buy, they came to browse, research, and compare. That engagement created something more valuable than sales: loyalty. From there, Amazon expanded relentlessly. Books, to CDs, to DVDs, to toys, to electronics. By the end of the 90s, it wasn't just a bookstore anymore. It was becoming a digital everything store. Revenue was exploding, traffic was surging, Wall Street was falling in love. Amazon had become the poster child of the new economy. But Bezos wasn't just focused on what they were selling. He was obsessing over the infrastructure that made it all possible. In 2000, he made a move that seemed counterintuitive. He launched Amazon Marketplace, inviting third-party sellers to compete directly on Amazon's platform. Most people thought he was crazy. Why invite competition? But Jeff saw the bigger picture. Marketplace let Amazon grow its catalog without holding inventory. More importantly, it gave the company an incredible source of data about what customers actually wanted. That same year, Amazon started acquiring companies strategically. Alexa Internet for web analytics, Audible for audiobooks, eventually Zappos for shoes and their legendary company culture. Later, Kiva Systems for warehouse robots, because humans are slow and, unfortunately, require healthcare and bathroom breaks. Amazon wasn't just selling things anymore. It was designing every single step of how things got sold, shipped, and reviewed. But just when Amazon seemed unstoppable, disaster struck. March 2000. The dot-com bubble burst. Tech stocks imploded overnight. The wild optimism of the 90s curdled into pure fear. And Amazon, still burning money and showing no profit, suddenly found itself on Wall Street's hit list. The stock crashed from over $100 to just $6. Headlines screamed, Amazon.bomb. Analysts predicted bankruptcy within months. The company that once rang bells for every sale was now setting off alarm bells across the entire industry. Inside Amazon, the mood was dark. Layoffs came in waves. Perks disappeared. Side projects got axed. The grand vision of the everything store suddenly looked like an expensive fantasy built on nothing but hype and venture capital fumes. For Bezos, the crash was deeply personal. He had convinced the world that Amazon wasn't a gamble. It was the inevitable future. Now that future was hanging by a thread. But instead of panicking or looking for a bailout, he went cold. Surgical. He slashed the burn rate, streamlined operations, cut entire teams. The door desks stayed, but the luxury of experimentation was gone. This was Amazon's crucible, the moment that would either kill the company or forge it into something unbreakable. Most of Amazon's .com peers, Pets.com, eToys, Cosmo, vanished into digital oblivion. Amazon barely survived, but it did survive. And in surviving, it transformed into something much more dangerous than it had been before. The transformation wasn't just philosophical, it was operational. By 2002, Bezos had a new obsession: build fast, scale harder, and never get caught off guard again. First target? Logistics. Amazon broke ground on massive fulfillment centers across the country: Nevada, Kentucky, Ohio. Inside these warehouses, the chaotic energy of the garage days was replaced by something colder and more precise: conveyor belts, barcode scanners, robotic arms, and software that tracked every package, every person, every second. This wasn't just e-commerce anymore. This was the birth of a logistical empire. Then came the kill shots. 2005, Amazon Prime. 2-day shipping, unlimited, no minimum order. To customers, it felt like pure convenience. To competitors, it looked like financial suicide. Industry analysts scoffed, free shipping on everything? They'll bleed money and be dead within a year. But Bezos knew something they didn't. Prime wasn't a customer perk, it was a psychological trap. And it worked beautifully. Customers who joined Prime didn't just stay, they transformed. They bought more. They clicked faster. They stopped comparing prices elsewhere. Customer loyalty wasn't being earned through great service. It was being systematically engineered. 2007, the Kindle. Amazon took aim at books again, but this time they weren't just changing where people bought them. They were changing what books actually were. The Kindle looked like a calculator that had married a notepad. Critics called it clunky and awkward, but readers? They devoured it. Within a few years, independent bookstores were shuttering across the country. Entire publishing business models collapsed overnight. Amazon had quietly, efficiently replaced paper with pixels. But the biggest revolution was happening behind the scenes, almost by accident. In the mid-2000s, Amazon's own tech teams were drowning trying to manage the company's explosive growth. So they built something new: modular infrastructure, flexible storage, elastic computing power that could scale up or down instantly. That internal project became Amazon Web Services. By 2006, AWS quietly launched to the public. What had started as an internal necessity became one of Amazon's most powerful weapons. Soon, AWS was powering Netflix, NASA, the CIA, and ironically, even parts of Walmart's operations. While companies were fighting to survive Amazon's retail dominance, they were unknowingly paying rent to use Amazon's servers. Bezos hadn't just built a store. He'd built the backbone of the entire internet. And then things got controversial. As third-party sellers flooded into Amazon's marketplace, many noticed something disturbing. Products that performed well would suddenly face eerily similar Amazon-branded competition. Same features, lower prices, better search placement. Sellers started whispering, then shouting. Amazon was using their own internal data to clone successful businesses and crush the very people who had made them successful. Amazon denied any wrongdoing, calling it coincidence rather than strategy. But to outsiders, it looked like a platform systematically devouring its own ecosystem. Bezos wasn't just beating competitors anymore. He was studying them like specimens, and when the moment was right, he absorbed what worked and discarded what didn't. The body count was staggering. Borders, Circuit City, Toys R Us, Radio Shack. One by one, retail giants that had dominated for decades collapsed under pressure that Amazon had helped create. Even Walmart, once considered untouchable, was forced to completely rebuild itself from the ground up just to compete. Inside Amazon, the corporate culture matched this ruthless efficiency. Meetings were lean, structured, and demanding. PowerPoint was banned. Bezos preferred 6-page written memos that required actual thought, logic, and data. Emotion didn't drive decisions, systems did. As one executive recalled, Bezos had a simple mantra: good intentions don't work, mechanisms do. His most famous line, "Your margin is my opportunity," wasn't just a clever slogan, it was a threat. Entire industries began restructuring themselves just to avoid becoming the next Amazon case study. Over time, Amazon evolved from a company into something more like a machine. Everything was optimized: fulfillment, pricing, recommendation algorithms, even customer behavior itself. Prime didn't just lock in customers, it conditioned them. It trained millions of people to expect speed, simplicity, and invisible efficiency. And once they adapted to that new reality, there was no going back. At the center of it all was Bezos. Part brilliant engineer, part military strategist, Amazon wasn't just a marketplace anymore. It had become the invisible infrastructure of modern capitalism itself. But no machine runs forever. And Bezos? He was already building his exit strategy. By the late 2000s and 10s, Jeff Bezos wasn't just wealthy. He was small nation wealthy, richer than entire countries, more influential than most world leaders. The guy who once packed books in a garage now controlled a global empire that touched nearly every aspect of modern life. The physical transformation was striking too. Gone was the awkward tech nerd with the goofy laugh. The new Bezos was bald, jacked, and carried himself with the quiet confidence of someone who had bent reality to his will. Less startup founder, more final boss of capitalism. 2017, Whole Foods. Amazon's $13.7 billion acquisition wasn't just about selling organic groceries. It was about reimagining logistics entirely. Overnight, physical stores became distribution nodes. Traditional checkout lines were replaced by app-based scanning. Customers walked in for produce and walked out as unwitting participants in an efficiency experiment. By this point, Amazon had tentacles in everything: news with the Washington Post, entertainment with Twitch and Prime Video, healthcare with Amazon Care, smart homes with Alexa. One by one, entire industries found themselves operating in Amazon's shadow. But with that immense size came inevitable scrutiny. Inside Amazon's warehouses, reports surfaced of grueling working conditions, impossible quotas, constant surveillance, workers collapsing from exhaustion. Critics described fulfillment centers as digital sweatshops. Employees started referring to their handheld scanners as the wristbands of Sauron. Yet somehow, the machine kept running. Orders still arrived on time. The system held together. Meanwhile, regulators were circling. Lawmakers raised increasingly loud alarms about Amazon's dominance, accusing the company of crushing small sellers, manipulating search results, and weaponizing private seller data to destroy competition. 2020. For the first time in his career, Bezos was summoned to testify before Congress. The world watched as the architect of the Everything Store sat calmly before a panel of lawmakers, defending Amazon's practices with the same methodical precision he'd used to build the company. The subtext was unmistakable. You've built something incredibly powerful. Now, we need to know who it actually serves. Then, almost anticlimactically, it ended. February 2021, Bezos announced he was stepping down as CEO. No scandal, no crisis, just a quiet handoff to Andy Jassy, the head of AWS. After 27 years, the architect of Amazon was exiting day-to-day operations, like someone who had finished building a machine and was ready to move on to the next project. So what's he doing now? Sitting around refreshing LinkedIn like the rest of us, pretending to network? Absolutely no. Instead, he pivoted to his original obsession: space. Blue Origin, the rocket company he'd been quietly funding for years, became his new focus. While other billionaires chased headlines with space tourism stunts, Bezos was thinking bigger. Reusable launch systems, lunar landers, massive orbital habitats. He started calling Earth a beautiful place you can visit, like it was a weekend vacation spot, while casually proposing we move all heavy industry off-planet to keep Earth pristine. His personal life became tabloid fodder too. His marriage to Mackenzie ended in what became the most expensive divorce in history. She walked away with $36 billion and immediately started giving most of it away, becoming one of the most prolific philanthropists of the decade. Meanwhile, Jeff made headlines for different reasons. A $500 million super yacht so large, it required a second support yacht just to function. The internet had a field day. But Bezos didn't seem to care about the mockery. He just kept building. Because here's the thing about Jeff Bezos. Earth was never the end game. Not for the kid who once dreamed of space hotels and orbital amusement parks in his high school graduation speech. Amazon wasn't his magnum opus. It was his launchpad. The boy who stared at stars and whispered about colonizing the moon. He's still up there, plotting humanity's next chapter. This isn't the end of his story. It's just where it gets really interesting.